Okay, tonight I want to talk a little bit about implicit and explicit learning in terms of environmental education from when I was in school. This comes out of lecture today, actually, and I guess it was sort of my contribution that actually introduced uh, the words, although obviously they're pretty common words, but nevertheless, I do have some feelings on this because when I was in elementary school, which is admittedly a fairly long time ago, but when I was in elementary school, there really was no explicit instruction in terms of environmental education. Um, However, I did grow up in a rural area. I grew up on a farm. I've been sort of surrounded and immersed in nature my entire life. I also have a fairly deep seated interest in nature, always have. Probably the reason I became a biologist. Probably the reason my master's project was ecological in nature. And probably the reason my master's project focused on an invasive species, uh, and so on and so forth. So, I do have, despite the fact that I never was explicitly um, engaged in terms of environmental education, I do feel I have a fairly deep seated implicit education in that, and it comes from both growing up in a rural area and I think going to school in a rural school. Um, I feel like we did a lot of field trips, we did camping, we did all these things, and even though we were never told let's go out into nature, I'm not really sure we ever had to be. The fact of the matter is, the vast majority of us came from farms. We were familiar with what we were going out into. We understood it better than the teachers, I think, some of the time. And I think it's an indication, maybe, or at least an example of where the students can teach the teacher as much as the teacher can teach them in a lot of ways, in terms of survival out in nature and so on and so forth. I'm really experienced, and some of that comes from school. There's no question about it. But I mean, I've gone winter camping lots of times. I actually enjoy that because it's an added challenge over normal camping, and you usually go in the mountains, or at least I've usually gone in the mountains, and so I mean, it's a pretty intense experience, and so despite the fact that I never had any, blatant, you know, this is what we're talking about today sort of thing in terms of environmental education, I do feel that environmental education probably has been a fairly big part of my education, maybe not directly, but indirectly, and due to circumstance. And, I've probably mentioned this before in other journal entries, but I honestly believe that rural people in Canada, at least, and I suspect in places like Australia too, where there's a fairly marked rural urban split, like there is in Canada, um, I think we have more opportunities for interaction with nature. In fact, I know we have more opportunities for interaction with wildlife and nature than city people do. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say city people don't know anything about environment, because I mean the city is an environment, but it's not what we would coin a natural environment. And I don't like that language, which is why I use the quotations, because humans, being part of the natural environment, can't technically do anything that's not natural, but we've decided as a species to suggest that anything we do is unnatural and anything any other animal does is natural. It's a bit of an absurdity, I'm not going to lie, and it bothers me a bit, just because it's so groundless in terms of its base. But I mean, people do that. We tend to classify things as belonging to humans and belonging to the rest of nature. And is that right? Well, no, it's not right. Humans are part of nature. Everybody knows that, or at least any rational person knows that. And consequently, humans can't actually do anything that's not natural. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good, of course. Um, don't want to get bogged down in a semantic argument about, well, anything that's natural is good. Well, anything that's natural is not good. Sometimes when beavers dam up streams and stuff like that, it causes flooding in other places and stuff like that. That's not good for an awful lot of species, not just people. But yet it's what beavers do, and you can't blame the beaver for doing something unnatural. It's doing what's natural to it. The same way that building hydroelectric dams in a lot of ways are doing something that's natural to us as humans. It doesn't make it good. It doesn't give any indication of whether it's good or bad. In fact, morality doesn't even play into the equation when you're talking about definitions of words. And so I do have a bit of a problem with the language surrounding a lot of environmental stuff. I think it's, well, I think it actually borders on fallacious, and it certainly is obscenely ignorant of reality. This whole idea that humans can somehow extricate themselves from nature. Well, go ahead, and I'll be at your funeral in 2 weeks when you starve to death. It's obscene, it's absurd, and it's actually a pet peeve of mine. I have no problem with people being vegetarians and stuff like that. I do struggle a little bit with the hardcore vegans because I don't think they're living in reality. I'm a biologist, and I can assure these people that as a human animal, we are definitely predators. We have an awful lot of predatory features, including forward-looking eyes and canines and all sorts of things that are clearly predatory features. Now, does that mean that we have to eat meat? Well, no, but as you probably know, people that don't eat meat have to be pretty careful about how they're taking in certain vitamins and certain minerals and so on and so forth, because it is hard to get a very balanced diet without meat. Not eating meat is a choice, but it should remain as a choice. I don't like being told that I shouldn't eat meat, and I don't expect somebody who is a vegetarian likes being told that they should. And I don't tell them that. I just think that I've kind of gone off on a tangent here, but I think actually, nevertheless, it is based in truth. But to get back to implicit and explicit, I haven't had a lot of explicit instruction in environmental education, but the factors and the reality surrounding how and where I grew up lended themselves to an implicit instruction that you couldn't have avoided if you wanted to. And so that surrounded with my 2 biology degrees and so on and so forth, I think actually gives me a fair bit of understanding in terms of natural systems and what's going on in the world. And I'm not actively environmental, but I'm also not actively destructive. I don't litter. I do recycle. I do shut off my lights. I do turn off my computers, although that's fairly recent. But nevertheless, I am doing that. I try not to waste water. Have I never wasted a gallon of water? Well, sure I have, but it's not my MO, and it's not something that I intend to do when I do it. I don't know. Just some thoughts, I guess.